She stole his money, his leverage, his heart, and then she disappeared. 3 years later, Park Hyunwoo is about to learn the truth. The woman he built his life around hating was never the villain in his story. She was the knife his own father used against him. If you're already hooked, don't go anywhere. Hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. And share this with someone who lives for a good enemies to lovers tale. Let's get into it. The rain over Seoul descended like a heavy velvet curtain, blurring the neon lights of Gangnam into smears of electric blue and bruised purple. Park Hyunwoo stood at the apex of the 80th floor penthouse of the Park International Tower, watching droplets race down reinforced glass. He was a man carved from marble and shadow. For 3 years, he had been a ghost haunting his own halls, driven by a single cold obsession. The woman who had dismantled his heart and his bank accounts, in one swift, surgical strike, was back in his city. His phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. Hyunwoo picked it up. A single message glowed on the screen. She is at the Blue Velvet Lounge. Room 402. 7 minutes later, he was already beside his car in the underground parking lot. Hyunwoo didn't call for his driver. He drove himself, the engine of his black Bugatti roaring through rain-slicked streets like a predator on the scent of blood. His mind replayed the last time he had seen Vicencia. The dim hotel room in Singapore, the way she'd whispered promises of a future together while her fingers danced across his laptop keys, siphoning $40 million into untraceable offshore accounts. She hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen the encrypted drive that held the leverage he needed to control the ruling party. She had left him exposed, and Park Hyunwoo did not survive vulnerability. The Blue Velvet Lounge smelled of expensive tobacco and desperation. He bypassed the bowing concierge, his presence alone sharp enough to cut through protocol. No one asked for his membership card. No one dared. He reached room 402 and kicked the door open with controlled violence. The room was soaked in dim crimson light. Vicencia sat on a plush velvet sofa, a glass of amber liquid cradled in her hand. She wore shimmering emerald silk that clung to her curves, her skin glowing under the low lights. She didn't flinch. She only tilted her head, dark eyes locking onto his with calm defiance. "You're late, Hyunwoo," she said, her voice a low, melodic rasp that sent an unwelcome jolt down his spine. "I expected you at the airport 3 days ago." "I wanted to see how long you'd play the ghost," he replied, stepping inside. He slammed the door shut. Vicencia rose to her feet, the silk whispering as she moved. She stopped inches from him. The scent of her, sandalwood and something metallic, like rain on hot pavement, hit him hard. "You look tired," she murmured. "Does the crown weigh that much? Or is it the guilt of what your father did to build it?" His hand shot out, fingers gripping her chin with punishing force. He tilted her face upward. "You don't get to mention my father," he growled. "You don't get to speak at all. You're a thief, Vicencia. A criminal who thought I was a mark." She laughed softly. "I never thought you were a mark. I knew exactly who you were. That was the problem." "Where is the drive?" he demanded, his thumb brushing her lower lip, an unconscious intimacy that betrayed his fury. "Gone," she lied smoothly. "I sold it in Macau." Hyunwoo lunged forward, driving her back until she hit the wall. The frame of a painting rattled, but he didn't care. He pinned her there, his body pressed flush against hers, heat and tension choking the air between them. Her heart pounded wildly against his chest. "You've been playing a fool," he spat, his voice low and cruel. "Pretending to be untouchable while everyone else bled for you. Do you think that makes you clever? It just makes you pathetic." Vicencia's hands rose, steady as she gripped his lapels, not to push him away, but to pull him closer. "Then why haven't you killed me?" she whispered. "You have the guns, the guards, the power. So why is your heart racing like a boy's first mistake?" "It's rage," he snapped, though the lie tasted like ash. "Is it?" She leaned in, breath warm against his ear. "I remember how you touched me before you knew who I was. Paris, Singapore, London. You still want me." His grip slid to the back of her neck, fingers threading into her hair. He tilted her head back, exposing the elegant line of her throat. "I should break you," he whispered, voice splintering. "I should hand you over and watch them destroy you." "Do it," she dared, eyes blazing. "But you don't want justice. You want possession." Something in him snapped. Hyunwoo crushed his mouth against hers. Not a kiss, but a collision. Teeth, heat, hunger. A declaration of war. Vicencia met him without hesitation, hands sliding into his hair, pulling him deeper into ruin. The kiss tasted of whiskey and vengeance. His hand dragged down her waist, pulling her hard against him, letting her feel exactly what she did to him. The world, politics, betrayal, boardrooms vanished. There was only her. He broke the kiss, his mouth trailing along her jaw, teeth grazing her neck. "You think this changes anything?" he murmured. "It changes everything," she gasped. "It means I still own you, even now." The words froze him. Hyunwoo pulled back abruptly, breath ragged. The mask slid back into place. He adjusted his jacket, eyes glacial once more. "Get your things," he said. Vicencia straightened her dress, lips swollen, hair undone. "Am I going to jail?" "No," he opened the door. "Assemblyman Kong is moving against my board. He plans to use your theft to bury me. You're going to help me destroy him. And if I refuse?" His gaze was lethal. "Then the last 3 years will feel merciful compared to what comes next. You're my prisoner now, until your debt is paid." Vicencia brushed past him, her shoulder lingering against his. "Careful, Hyunwoo," she said softly. "You brought a thief into your home twice. Don't be shocked if I steal something else." He watched her walk toward the elevator, hips swaying, confidence weaponized. Then he followed. Vicencia stood in the corner of the elevator, her reflection caught in the polished chrome panels, looking every bit the captive queen. Hyunwoo stood at the front. He didn't look at her, yet he was acutely aware of the space she occupied, the faint trace of her perfume clinging to his suit like a brand. When the elevator doors slid open to the basement parking garage, they stepped out without a word and headed for his car. "In the car," he said flatly as he slid into the driver's seat. He didn't wait to see if she obeyed. He knew she would. The moment she closed the door, the Bugatti tore out of the garage, its tires screaming against the concrete. Seoul streaked past the windows in restless fragments. Convenience stores, late-night pharmacies, skeletal cranes frozen over half-built towers. They were heading north toward Songbukdong. "You're taking me to your fortress," Vicencia said at last. She leaned back against the leather, studying his profile. "Is this for my protection or your peace of mind? Because we both know I can't be kept in a cage for long." Hyunwoo's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You're not a guest, and this isn't a sanctuary. It's a laboratory. You'll reconstruct every file you erased and every contact you burned. If you so much as test a window, my security will treat it as an escape attempt." "And the job you mentioned?" she asked, mockery flickering in her eyes. "Your staff isn't stupid. They'll see a woman in a torn silk dress being dragged into your house at 2 a.m. and draw the obvious conclusion." "Let them," he said, eyes locked on the road. "Their gossip won't affect my stock price. Your failure to deliver Assemblyman Kong will." The estate rose from the hillside like a fortress of glass and dark stone. The gates opened silently, and the car climbed the winding drive. Inside, lights flickered on to reveal an interior that felt more like a gallery than a home. Cold, precise, untouchable. Hyunwoo dismissed the guards with a flick of his wrist. "This is where the game changes," he said, turning to her. "You're done running. I've set up a workstation in the library, air-gapped. No internet. No signals. You start tonight." Vicencia walked into the center of the foyer, tilting her head as she took in the space. She looked out of place in evening wear, yet somehow commanded the room. "I haven't slept in 36 hours, and I haven't eaten since yesterday. Do you want a partner or a corpse? Because if I'm digging through your family's secrets, I need a bath and a drink." Irritation flared, followed by reluctant respect. Even cornered, she negotiated. "The kitchen is stocked," he said. "There are clothes in the guest suite. New. Use them. I don't want to see that dress again. It reminds me of the night I should have turned you in. Or the night you couldn't stop kissing me?" She shot back, stepping closer. The air tightened instantly. "You can change the setting, Hyunwoo, but not the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." "Go," he said quietly. "Before I decide, prison is simpler." She searched his face for a heartbeat, then turned and disappeared up the staircase. Hyunwoo didn't go to his bedroom. He went to the library, poured himself a double scotch, and sat in the dark, staring at the empty workstation as he waited for her. 2 hours later, the door creaked open. Vicencia entered wearing an oversized white button-down shirt, his. Her hair was damp, falling loosely over her shoulders. She looked smaller, softer, and far more dangerous. "The clothes fit," she said, already sitting at the desk. Her fingers moved across the keys with the same terrifying speed he remembered. "What are you looking for first?" he asked, standing behind her. "The Myri project," she replied. "Your father didn't just bribe Kong. He used a Cayman shell company to buy votes for the redevelopment bill. Kong kept a secondary ledger. That's what I took. Hyunwoo leaned over her chair, the scent of soap and warm skin clouding his thoughts. If you had it, why didn't you use it? Because you were the better weapon, she said, finally looking up. And because I didn't want you in a cell. I took the money to disappear. I kept the drive to protect you. You stole 40 million, he said coldly, though the certainty in his voice wavered. You think you know everything about me, she snapped, standing abruptly. But you've never seen what I've had to do to stay alive. The argument snapped into something physical. He caught her waist, fingers biting into the fabric. You're still a liar. Then why are you holding me like I'm the only thing keeping you upright? He answered by sweeping the desk clear and lifting her onto it. Her breath hitched as her legs wrapped around his waist. This kiss wasn't fury, it was hunger. Desperate and reckless. His hands slid beneath the shirt, pulling her closer until there was no space left. Her nails scraped his scalp as her breathing fractured. I hate you, he murmured. I know, she whispered. Don't stop. He kissed her throat, traced the pulse beneath her skin. In the quiet library, surrounded by secrets that could ruin them, restraint finally broke. Later, as dawn bled through the windows, the fire cooled into a heavy stillness. They sat tangled in the aftermath, the desk littered with broken order. This doesn't change anything, Hyunwoo said, voice hoarse. I know, Vicencia replied, but it changes the stakes. He studied her, strategist, thief, enemy lover. We have a gala tomorrow. Kong will be there, and he'll be expecting you. She straightened, pulling his shirt tighter around herself, her expression turning sharp and professional. Then let's give him exactly what he fears. The following night, Park Hyunwoo stood in his dressing room, adjusting the cufflinks of a tuxedo that felt more like armor. From the adjacent wing came the muffled sounds of stylists and assistants preparing Vicencia for her role as the disruption he had planned. When she finally emerged, the air in the hallway seemed to thin. She wore a midnight blue sequin gown that moved like liquid metal, catching the light with every step. The dress was backless, revealing the smooth expanse of skin he had mapped with his fingertips only hours before. You look like a weapon, Hyunwoo said, his voice steady despite the tightening in his chest. Vicencia stopped before a full-length mirror and adjusted an earring. That's the point. You didn't buy this dress for a date. You bought it for distraction. The objective hasn't changed, he said, stepping closer until their reflections merged in the glass. You find the chief of staff, Choi. He carries the authentication key for Kang's private server. It's a physical token, most likely on him. Get close, get the key, and leave. I'll handle the distractions. I thought the key had always been with your father's attorney, Vicencia said, frowning. He was killed, Hyunwoo replied, his tone tight. Choi, he's my cousin's man, took it. Silence stretched between them, the mirror reflecting their tense stillness. And if Choi wants more than conversation, she finally asked, meeting his eyes in the glass. The spark there tightened his jaw. Then I'll handle him, Hyunwoo said. He handed her a small flesh-colored earpiece. I'll be listening. If things go sideways, you leave. Don't play hero, Vicencia. You're too valuable to lose. The gala was held at the Grand Hyatt, a monument to old money and quiet corruption. As they stepped out of the limousine, camera flashes exploded around them. Hyunwoo placed a proprietary hand at the small of her back, the heat of his palm seeping through the fabric. To the world, they were perfection, the titan of industry and his stunning companion. To each other, they were players in a game where losing meant destruction. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with silk, champagne, and whispered conspiracies. Hyunwoo murmured into her ear, his lips brushing her lobe. Choi's in the charcoal suit by the balcony. He likes expensive scotch and women who look dangerous. Go! Vicencia drifted away with effortless grace. Hyunwoo watched her longer than he should have before board members intercepted him. He engaged automatically, shaking hands with men he intended to dismantle, while keeping her in his peripheral vision. Through his earpiece came the faint rustle of fabric, then her voice, smooth and deliberate. Mr. Choi? I believe you're holding the drink I was looking for. Possessiveness flared, sharp and unwelcome. Hyunwoo reminded himself this was the plan. A woman like you doesn't stay unnoticed, Choi said, his confidence thick. What interest could you have in a man like me? I admire power that doesn't need to shout, Vicencia replied. And I hear you're the one who keeps things running while others take the credit. Hyunwoo's gaze narrowed as Choi guided her toward the heavy curtains near the terrace. He disengaged from his conversation, moving with increasing urgency. The key, Hyunwoo muttered. Stay focused. I am, she whispered back. Minutes stretched thin. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. Choi had Vicencia pressed against the stone railing, his hand too high on her thigh. You're bold, Choi said thickly. But careless. Hyunwoo didn't think. He moved on instinct, grabbing Choi by the shoulder and spinning him around. His fist connected with a dull crack. Choi stumbled and slid across the stone floor as he passed out. Vicencia stood frozen for a second, then lifted her hand. A small silver token glinted between her fingers. Her expression hardened. I had it. I was seconds from a clean exit. He was touching you, Hyunwoo growled, taking the token and shoving it into his pocket. It was a job, she snapped. You told me to be the bait. You nearly ruined everything because you lost control. I don't care about the operation right now, he said, backing her against the railing. I told you to get the key, not let him touch you. Are you jealous? She challenged, though her voice wavered. Because that's what this looks like. You aren't a toy, he said quietly. And you aren't his. Every lie, every breath, every inch of you is bound to the debt you owe me. The tension sparked. Vicencia grabbed his jacket and pulled him close. Then stop talking and do something about it. He kissed her hard, driven by adrenaline and fury. The gala continued behind them, unaware, while their breathing tangled in the dark. His hands traced the open back of her dress, heat flaring between them. For a moment, nothing else mattered. The earpiece crackled. Sir, security is moving toward the West Terrace. We have a breach. Hyunwoo pulled back instantly. He looked at the stirring Choi on the floor, then toward the doors where shadows approached. We're leaving, he said, grip tightening on her hand. They ran, vanishing into the service corridors as the terrace doors burst open. The two got into the car parked in the lot, and the driver immediately pulled away from the Grand Hyatt Seoul, narrowly missing a transport van positioned to block their exit. Beside him in the back seat, Vicencia was already shedding the midnight blue sequins, pulling a heavy tactical jacket over her shoulders that had been stashed in the car. Her breathing was steady, a sharp contrast to the thunder in Hyunwoo's chest. He glanced at the rearview mirror. Two black sedans were weaving through the late-night traffic of Yongsan-gu. They aren't Kang's men, Vicencia said, her voice tight as she leaned closer. Kang's security is loud and sloppy. These drivers are surgical. They're staying in our blind spots. I know who they are, Hyunwoo growled, ordering the driver to push harder. The car surged forward, tires skimming over puddles as the streets blurred around them. Park Industries' internal security. My cousin Juno's personal detail. He's stopped pretending he wants the CEO chair and started trying to take it. A family betrayal, she said, a grim smile touching her lips. I'd almost feel bad for you if I weren't currently in the line of fire. Save the pity. Juno's a snake, but he's a snake with my father's blessing. The first gunshot cracked through the rain. The rear windshield exploded inward in a spray of glass. The driver swerved hard, tires screaming against wet asphalt as another round tore through the trunk. Down! Hyunwoo shoved Vicencia toward the floor just as the second sedan pulled alongside them. A muzzle flashed from the passenger window. Their driver retaliated, one hand steady on the wheel, the other firing through the half-open window. Hyunwoo reached beneath his seat, retrieving the compact pistol taped there months ago for emergencies he had hoped would never come. He rolled down his window just enough, leaning out as the wind lashed his face. He fired twice, controlled, precise. The pursuing sedan clipped a stack of plastic crates, fishtailed, and smashed into a delivery truck parked along the curb. The second car didn't hesitate. It accelerated and one pursuer shot. A bullet grazed Hyunwoo's upper arm. He felt the burn before he registered the sound, a hot, slicing line across his skin. His sleeve darkened instantly, but there was no deep impact, no numbing shock. Just a graze. Vicencia's eyes widened as she grabbed his arm. You're hit. It's nothing, he snapped through clenched teeth. Just a graze. The driver swerved through traffic, narrowly avoiding taxis and buses, tires screeching against slick asphalt. The black sedan stayed close, weaving aggressively, attempting to box them in. Hyunwoo's mind raced. Every intersection, every neon-lit street became a potential trap. Then Hyunwoo gave a single instruction. Underpass. Now! The car surged toward a low overpass. Oncoming traffic forced the pursuers to brake just long enough for Hyunwoo's driver to slip through the narrow gap, engines roaring. They didn't slow until the city lights blurred behind them. At Juno's penthouse that same night, one of his men stepped forward, bowing slightly. Sir, the mission failed. They got away. Juno's eyes narrowed, his patience snapping. Failed. Do you know what failure costs in this family? His voice was ice, each word a blade. The man swallowed, then quickly added, but we can track him. The key your cousin took from Choi, it was a duplicate. Our hackers are working on it. Once they crack it, we can trace Hyunwoo's movements. Juno's lips curved into a cold, satisfied smile. Good. Then we track him, and we end him. An hour later, after doubling back twice and switching routes through main roads and side streets alike, the driver killed the headlights and veered into a subterranean garage beneath a crumbling apartment block. Hyunwoo finally allowed himself to exhale. Blood from the graze had seeped through his shirt, but it wasn't deep. Painful, yes, but survivable. Hyunwoo and Vicencia slipped out of the car. Hyunwoo glanced around, jaw tight as he assessed the shadows and concrete pillars. Then he turned to Vicencia. We can't go back to the estate. It's compromised, he said quietly. We stay here for a while. Vicencia gave a small nod. Hyunwoo then faced the driver, his expression hardening. Leave. Now. Take the car far from here. The driver nodded without a word, slamming the vehicle into gear and disappearing into the night. Hyunwoo glanced at Vicencia, his expression unreadable. Come on. He led her through the shadows toward a steel door tucked along the far wall of the garage, the private entrance to the crumbling apartment building above. A keypad glowed faintly beside it. Hyunwoo stepped forward and punched in the code without hesitation. The lock clicked open. He pulled the door ajar and motioned for Vicencia to go in first before following her inside. When they stepped into the living room, Vicencia moved through the cramped space and stopped by the window, peering out at the street below. Across from the building, a night market buzzed with life. The only light inside came from the flickering neon sign of a 24-hour karaoke bar across the street, casting shifting pink and blue shadows across the worn walls. Hyunwoo leaned back against the door and closed his eyes for a brief moment. Why here? Vicencia asked quietly. It's the last place anyone would look for a billionaire, Hyunwoo replied, shrugging off his tuxedo jacket and tossing it onto the sofa. Juno thinks I'm a creature of comfort. He'll search luxury villas in Cheongdam-dong. He won't look for me where the water runs cold and the neighbors don't know my face. Vicencia turned from the window, her gaze settling on him. The silence stretched, heavy with what they hadn't finished on the balcony. Let me take care of your wound, she said quietly. He looked down. His left sleeve was soaked with blood. Sit down, Hyunwoo. You're no use to me if you bleed. She pushed him towards the kitchen and then into a kitchen chair and disappeared into the bathroom, returning with a battered first aid kit. He watched as she stood beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. Her movements were precise and controlled as she helped him shrug off his shirt, carefully easing the fabric over his shoulders to avoid the wound. Then she reached for the alcohol, her fingers steady as she cleaned the cut. The closeness was torture. Every accidental brush of her hand against his skin dragged the memory of her body, pressed to his back, to the surface. Why didn't you tell me about your father? She asked suddenly, focused on the bandage. Hyunwoo stiffened. Tell you what? That he was a ruthless visionary. That he was the one who made me betrayed you, she said, lifting her eyes to his. They were raw, stripped of pride. I didn't steal for money. I didn't betray you for greed. Her voice broke. Your father ordered me to. She swallowed. 2 weeks after we fell in love, that's when it started. Her fingers trembled. He said if I refused, my family would disappear. He sent me pictures of them going about their day like nothing was wrong. A hollow laugh escaped her. He said you were too soft, that you needed to be broken. She held his gaze. I wasn't the thief in his story, Hyunwoo. I was the knife. I was the test he designed to see if you could survive betrayal. He grabbed her wrists. You're lying. He wanted me to succeed, even in his own twisted ways. He wanted a successor, not a son, she said quietly. He knew I loved you. That made me dangerous. Her gaze didn't waver. He told me if I ever told you the truth, the deal was off. So when he ordered me to steal the Myri files and 40 million won, I did. And then I ran. She inhaled slowly. I let you hate me, Hyunwoo, because your hatred kept everyone alive. And the drive, the Myri files, he whispered. The one you said you sold? I couldn't, she admitted, her voice trembling. It was my only insurance. After your father died, it became the only thing that could save you. Assemblyman Kong and Juno sent men after me once they found out those files could destroy them. But I survived every attack, and I came back to you, Hyunwoo. Because I love you. The truth landed harder than any blow. Fury twisted into something desperate, aching. I spent 3 years imagining how I'd make you pay, he murmured. I built my life around the hole you left. Then fill it, she whispered. He lifted her onto the small kitchen table, the wood groaning beneath them. He kissed her, and this time it was stripped of anger. His hands moved as if relearning her, memorizing her again. Every touch was an apology. Every breath was confession. Hyunwoo felt the walls around his heart collapse, replaced by a fierce, frightening protectiveness. Hours later, they lay on the narrow bed. Vicencia curled against his side, her warmth a fragile comfort. Hyunwoo stared at the ceiling, fingers threading through her hair, when his silenced phone vibrated on the floor. Expecting a message from one of his men, he picked it up. Instead, it was an encrypted alert from his private server, the only one he and his late father's attorney could access. What is it? Vicencia asked, lifting her head. Hyunwoo opened the file, his face draining of color. He scrolled through the data. It wasn't just bribes. It was a plan for his removal. His father had intended to replace him with Juno once the Myri project was complete. Vicencia's theft hadn't been a test. It had been the opening move of a coup. Hyunwoo, Vicencia whispered, pointing at the screen. Look at the timestamp. The file had been accessed by someone else. Someone else has the key, he said, cold spreading through him. The one we took from Choi, it was a duplicate. A tracker. Vicencia's voice trembled. This means yesterday was all an act. Hyunwoo, you've been played by Kong and your cousin. Below them, the heavy engines rumbled in idle. Then came the sharp, unmistakable metallic clink of a flashbang grenade. One bouncing across the hallway floor, the other shattering through the bedroom window. Moo! Hyunwoo shouted, throwing himself over her as the world detonated into white light and shattering glass. Shards of glass rained down, embedding into the heavy tactical jacket Hyunwoo had draped over them when he dragged her to the floor. Stay down, he roared, though his own voice sounded distant, as if it were echoing from the bottom of a deep well. Vicencia didn't panic. She rolled out from beneath him, rose to her feet, and snatched her handgun from where it was stashed under the pillow. She moved toward the living room, firing 2 precise rounds at the door, just as the wood splintered under the battering ram's impact. We can use the back fire escape, she gasped, sprinting back to the bedroom. Then she added urgently, they've bottlenecked the hallway. If we stay, we're boxed in. Hyunwoo didn't hesitate. He followed her to the kitchen and, once inside, slammed the kitchen table against the door, to buy them a few precious seconds. They scrambled through the shattered kitchen window, the cold air slapping their faces. The fire escape groaned under their weight, a rusted skeletal structure clinging precariously to the side of the building. Below, the narrow alley was blocked by 2 black vans, men in tactical gear spilling out like ink. We can't go down, Hyunwoo hissed, looking up. The roof. We jumped the gap to the karaoke building. They climbed fast, the metal stairs clanging loudly, betraying their position. Bullets sparked against the iron railings, slicing past their ears. At the landing, Vicencia pivoted and fired a suppressing volley, forcing the mercenaries to dive for cover. You're a better shooter than my entire security detail, Hyunwoo muttered as he hauled her onto the flat gravel roof. Vicencia smirked, tilting her head. I aim to impress. The gap between the buildings yawned before them. 5 feet of empty space plunging into an abyss of trash bags and shadow. Hyunwoo jumped first, landing hard on the neighboring roof. He spun just in time to catch Vicencia midair, her body slamming into his chest with enough force to nearly send them both over the edge. For a heartbeat, they hung there, suspended above the city, hearts pounding in frantic, terrifying synchrony. I have you, he whispered, fingers digging into her waist as he pulled her to safety. They then descended through the karaoke building's service stairwell and spilled into the chaos of the night market. The smell of fried food, neon lights, and blaring K-pop provided perfect camouflage. They moved through the crowd with heads down, weaving between tourists and drunken revelers until they reached a silver sedan parked 3 blocks away. Once inside, Hyunwoo didn't drive toward the outskirts. He headed for the river. Where are we going? Vicencia asked, as she reloaded her weapon. The safe house is gone. The company is compromised. We have nowhere left to hide. We stop hiding, Hyunwoo said, his voice dropping into a register of cold certainty. My cousin thinks he's won because he forced me out. But he's forgotten that I still have the one thing he would never get, the override codes for the Myri server. The server's at the shipyard, Vicencia realized, her brow furrowing. The offshore facility is a fortress. Then we storm the place. They drove to a secluded stretch of the Han River, where a sleek, high-speed RIB boat waited in a private slip. Hyunwoo climbed aboard first and pulled Vicencia after him, then brought the engine to life. As the boat cut through the dark water, Seoul's city lights receded, replaced by the looming silhouettes of industrial cranes and stacked shipping containers. The silence stretched until Vicencia spoke, her voice barely audible over the engine's hum. If we don't make it out of that shipyard, the 40 million, I didn't spend a single one. It's in a trust in your name. I was going to return it once the dust settled. Hyunwoo kept his eyes on the horizon. Keep it. If we survive this, it's your dowry. She let out a soft, startled laugh. Is that a proposal, Park Hyunwoo? Or just another debt you're trying to collect? It's a claim, he said, finally turning toward her. He cupped the back of her neck, pulling her in until their foreheads touched. I told you before. You're mine. He then kissed her, slow, deep, tasting of salt and adrenaline. It sealed a forbidden pact. They would either rule together or burn together. 10 minutes later, the shipyard emerged from the fog, a maze of steel and shadow. They docked in silence, moving through the container rows like ghosts, taking down security guards along the way. Hyunwoo led her to the central hub, a reinforced concrete structure housing the heartbeat of Park Industries' data. Inside, the air-conditioned chill raised goosebumps. Hyunwoo bypassed the biometric scanners with a physical key hidden in his watch. At the main terminal, his fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm initiating the leak, he whispered. Every bribe, every contract, every one of Kong and Juno's secrets. It goes to every major news outlet in Asia in 5 minutes. Wait, Vicencia said sharply, eyes locked on a secondary monitor. Hyunwoo, look at the main gate feed. A convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the screen. Juno's men weren't alone. Assemblyman Kong had arrived in person, flanked by a small army of private bodyguards. They're here to erase the facility, Vicencia said, her voice tight. If the server burns, the evidence dies with it. I need 3 minutes for the upload, Hyunwoo said, jaw clenched. He glanced at the heavy steel server room door. There's a sublevel exit through the cooling tunnels. Go. I'll hold them here. Don't you dare, she snapped, eyes blazing. We didn't come this far for you to play the martyr. We finish this together. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the building as the main gates were breached. Alarms wailed, red emergency lights flooding the room like blood. 2 minutes, Hyunwoo shouted. Vicencia took position by the door, gun raised, her face carved into lethal calm. Then you'd better type faster, she said coolly. Because the villains are at the door, and I'm out of polite conversation. As the first 2 mercenaries appeared at the end of the hallway, Hyunwoo hit enter. He stood, drawing his weapon, and stepped beside her. Shoulder to shoulder, they took out the 2 attackers. The progress bar on the monitor crawled agonizingly. Outside, the thunder of boots and metallic clinks of tactical gear announced the end was near. Hyunwoo planted his feet firmly, his shadow stretching long and jagged across the floor, while Vicencia checked her sight line, her breathing so shallow it was almost non-existent. They're not going to negotiate, Vicencia said, her voice a calm anchor amid sirens. Kong and Juno know if that upload hits 100%, they're finished. Let them try, Hyunwoo replied, grip steady. I spent my life building an empire to please a father who never wanted me to succeed. If I have to watch it burn to take both down with me, I'll strike the match myself. The door buckled under a kinetic breach. A deafening crack echoed as the hinges groaned. Vicencia fired first, a precise 3-round burst forcing the lead mercenary to retreat. The air filled with the smell of cordite and overheated processors. Hyunwoo, the terminal, she shouted. He glanced back. 96%. Almost there. A voice boomed from the hallway, amplified but still aristocratic. Hyunwoo, stop this madness. You're destroying the Park legacy for a woman who sold you out 3 years ago. Think of your father's name. Hyunwoo's face hardened. My father's name was built on the backs of people like her, Kong. You and my cousin can have the legacy. I'm taking the truth. The progress bar hit 100. A soft chime sounded, the most beautiful noise Hyunwoo had ever heard. Across the globe, encrypted data packets streamed to news agencies from Seoul to London. Bribes, contracts, assassination orders, all exposed. It's done, Hyunwoo whispered. Then we leave, Vicencia said, grabbing a flashbang. Now! She tossed it into the hallway. White light and deafening noise disoriented their pursuers. Hyunwoo grabbed her hand. They didn't run for the main exit. He led her to the rear of the server bank, where a heavy floor grate concealed the cooling system intake. They dropped into darkness as gunfire shredded the room behind them. The cooling tunnels were a labyrinth of cold air and rushing water. Their splashing steps were swallowed by the roar of massive ventilation fans, shadows stretching endlessly along the concrete walls. 5 minutes later, they emerged near the pier, salt spray stinging their faces. They weren't alone. Juno and Assemblyman Kong stood waiting near the dock, flanked by armed men spilling from the shadows. Kong must have slipped away earlier, the moment things turned unstable. Juno held a silenced submachine gun, immaculate despite the chaos. Kang's face, however, was twisted with something far less controlled, desperation. "You really are your father's son," Juno said almost conversationally. "So dramatic. So thorough. Do you know how much damage control this will take?" "There's no cleaning this up, Juno," Hyunwoo replied, stepping slightly in front of Vicencia. "The data is already out. By now, the Blue House has issued warrants for both of you. Especially you, Kong." Kang's lips curled, though strain flickered beneath the arrogance. "Politics survives scandal. It always does." "Not this time," Vicencia said calmly. "Every transaction, every offshore account, every private directive, every killing you ordered. It's everywhere." The distant thunder of helicopter blades cut through the night air, low, deliberate. Hyunwoo didn't look away from his cousin. "It seems the Blue House moved faster than you expected." For the first time, uncertainty cracked Juno's composure. Vicencia stepped forward slightly, stretching her shoulders as if preparing for nothing more than a morning run. Her voice was cool and precise. "Well, big boys, it's over." Uniformed officers flooded the pier from every direction, weapons raised, commands sharp and authoritative. "Drop your weapons." Kang's bodyguards hesitated. Juno calculated. Neither moved fast enough. The mercenaries dropped their weapons first, hands rising slowly. Kong followed. Juno, after a long, silent second, lifted his hands as well. There was nowhere left to run. Hyunwoo felt Vicencia's fingers curl around his hand. He gripped hers tightly. It was finally over. 1 hour later, Hyunwoo and Vicencia stood at the edge of the pier, watching dawn push away the last of the night. They had given their statements and were cleared to leave. Vicencia's hair tangled in the wind as she stared at the fading police lights. "It's done," she whispered. Hyunwoo stood beside her, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. "You're the most dangerous woman I've ever met. And you're the only man reckless enough to let me back in," she replied softly. Silence stretched between them, peaceful this time. "Where do we go now?" Vicencia asked. "Your board is in chaos. You're a king without a kingdom." "I don't want that filthy kingdom," he said firmly, watching the first line of sunlight break across the water. "I've always wanted to leave my father's business." He then turned to her. "I want a life. Something honest. With you." Vicencia looked at him, something gentle replacing the steel in her eyes. "Then let's stay," she said quietly. He pulled her into his arms as the sun rose fully over the horizon, bathing the harbor in quiet gold. 1 month had passed since the chaos at the shipyard. 1 month since the arrests. 1 month since the nation learned that their beloved Assemblyman Kong had been a monster in tailored suits. The scandal had left the country stunned. No one had expected him to be so depraved. What horrified them most was discovering he had diverted disaster relief funds meant for orphan children into offshore accounts. Money he later used to finance private assassinations and corporate sabotage. The man who had smiled at ribbon cuttings had been signing execution orders behind closed doors. It had also been 1 month since Hyunwoo and Vicencia were married. Hyunwoo stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his study that morning, a glass of dark amber liquid forgotten in his hand. Marriage had not softened him. It had steadied him. There was a difference. Vicencia appeared in the doorway. She wore one of his black silk shirts, the hem brushing mid-thigh, sleeves rolled casually to her elbows. "You're brooding again," she murmured, her voice a low, melodic vibration that seemed to hum through the room. Hyunwoo turned as she crossed the space between them, not stopping until she stood well within his reach. "I'm remembering," he corrected softly, setting the glass aside without breaking eye contact. "I'm remembering how it felt to hate you. It's becoming a difficult memory to hold on to." Vicencia reached for him, her fingers tracing a slow, deliberate path up his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath linen. She stepped closer, forcing him back against the edge of the table. "Hatred is exhausting, Hyunwoo," she said quietly. It's far more productive to focus on the debt. He chuckled, low, genuine, and wrapped his arms around her waist, drawing her flush against him. The brush of silk against his skin sparked like quiet lightning. The debt, he asked. I thought we settled that at the shipyard. The financial one, perhaps, she whispered, her hands sliding behind his neck, fingers threading into his hair. She tilted her head slightly, eyes catching the amber glow of the room. But there's the matter of the 3 years I was gone. The 3 years you spent wanting to punish me. I believe I still owe you quite a few nights of penance. Hyunwoo's gaze darkened. He leaned down, lips brushing near her ear. Penance is a dangerous word, he murmured, his voice roughened with promise. I might hold you to it. I'm counting on it, she breathed. He kissed her then, slow, deep, deliberate. Not the frantic collision of two people running from gunfire, but the unhurried claim of two who finally had time. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs locking around his waist as he carried her toward the bedroom, sunlight fading behind them. Inside the quiet sanctuary of the bedroom, as he laid her back against the sheets, Hyunwoo studied the woman who had once shattered his world and rebuilt it beside him. You're still a thief, he murmured, his hands rediscovering her with unhurried certainty. And you, she replied softly, pulling him down into her embrace, are exactly where you want to be. And that is where our story ends. Before you go, thank you. Every single one of you who watched all the way through means the world to me. I will see you in the next story. Until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.